So, since the release of my last video, Jagex have implemented a fix for the Venator bow, so now it's even better. Before the update, the bow was hitting 3 times as expected, but the damage of the second and third bounces was bugged. So instead of its max hits hitting 100% for the first hit, then 66% and then 66%, the initial hit was hitting for that 100%, but the bounce hits were only doing 50%, then 25% respectively. So the XP per hour gained whilst using the bow has jumped up slightly from around the 160k an hour mark to around 175k if you're looking at my last video. Additionally, the bow's value and cost per each of the Ancient Essence has also tanked so much that it's more affordable now. Originally I bought it for around 75 mil, but now it's sitting at around a cozy 30 mil or so, and the Essence is trading at only around 125 each, so the cost per hour is down to around 190k per hour, excluding arrow usage, which is pretty good for the XP rates you can get from this. Since then, I've been searching through Gilnear far and wide for the best places to use it for XP, for money, for AFK, for Slayer, and a mix of all the above, to really try and find out what value it can bring and how it'll fit into the meta. A lot of the clips you'll see are just shown off task, so you can expect the XP rates to be significantly higher when you're actually on task, so bear that in mind as we go through these. First up, I was looking at Dagoneths. These are quite a common Slayer task. So one of the really good multi-spots that you can go to is on the Jormungandr Isle after the completion of Fremnik Exiles. And it's a really good AFK spot to use the bow here. Although they still have some positive range defense, I was getting a modest 150k. To offset the cost here, you want to be picking up the Ensouled Heads, potentially using a Soul Bearer if you have one. But with these, really you are going to be losing money either way, as the drops are just terrible. They're really only good to kill for a quick cannonable Slayer task. Then next up there was Tazar, and honestly, it was as terrible as you can expect. Constantly getting attacked by the rangers and mages because the little white Tazars keep getting clipped. But although you have a chance of getting some of the Tazar armor and weapons in pieces, the drop rates are just so low and the standard drops are just terrible. The XP per hour is only just over 120k, so unless you really don't want to do Jad on task, you could opt to use the bow here. The XP is half decent, but it isn't really that AFK. Mutated Bloodvelds in the Catacombs of Kourend. Now this is a really decent spot to use the bow, mainly because it's so AFK. There are plenty of Bloodvelds in such a small and enclosed area, which really helps a lot, as the Bloodvelds would often wander in range of a bounce to get aggroed onto and then maintain an AFK state and good XP per hour. On average you can expect to get around 150k range XP an hour, and you can offset the cost of the bow by picking up the Blood Runes, Ensouled Heads and the occasional rune drop to Alk. Dust Devils were another good option, primarily because of the same points just mentioned for the Bloodvelds, but with these you could actually profit off them whilst getting range XP. Typically around the 250k an hour mark, whilst getting around 150k an hour range XP. You can bring a Ring of Wealth and toggle the coin collection setting here so you're not running around picking up all the coin drops, and for these you'll be picking up the noted bar drops and alchables like the Battle Staff, Van Braces and Rune Daggers. Now for Dust Devils, these are actually quite an interesting use case. Because the Dust Devil drops bones on death, you can actually bring a Bone Crusher here to pretty much stay here indefinitely, because in the Catacombs of Kourend, any time that you bury a bone, you get prayer back based on the bone type. As these just drop regular bones, you'll just get the 1 prayer point back, so just balance your prayer bonus, fill your invent with range pots, and stay there until you run out of range pot doses if you really wanted to. You'll begin to notice a pattern here. Abbey Demons were another half decent mob to kill with the bow, but you'll likely want to just kill these on task as these were slightly less AFK, and you'll really only regain your money back if you get lucky with a whip drop. You can expect to get around 110k XP an hour, which is lower than most of the mobs we've covered, because you're basically just going to get teleported all over, sometimes so far out of the way that you just don't have any other mobs near to you to bounce hits to. You get the idea though. Every single NPC within the Catacombs of Kourend that's under 2 tiles wide makes the bow a viable option to use if you want to AFK there and don't want to cannon outside of the catacombs. I've also had a look at how the bow compares against the traditional multi-target range training spots like the skeletons in the MM1 caves and the maniacal monkeys in the MM2 caves. The trade-off with these is that although you get the higher XP rates within the MM1 caves because you're able to make use of the Salve Amulet there, you'll be able to AFK more and stay in the MM2 caves for almost indefinitely, as the Maniacals drop the occasional 1-dose prayer potion. But on top of that, there is just so many of the monkeys, and the wandering range of them is huge, so if you just stick to the centre of the room, the hits just keep on bouncing over and over again, aggroing more and more monkeys. You can expect to get around 185k XP an hour within the MM1 caves, 230k with Rigor, and around 175k in the MM2 caves, and around 210k with Rigor. And then we come to the Inferno and Raids. I really would like to say it's useful, but in all honesty, it's not worth bringing. In the Inferno, more often than not, the hits were just not killing the nibblers and the mini blobs, and trying to set up use cases with it was just not worth the effort. Ultimately, if you're a first caper, you need to be looking at your supplies like this. If I bring this item in, will it save me a brew in the long run, or a prayer potion in the long run? And to be honest, no. I think it's more likely to cost you a prayer potion or an extra brew because of how finicky it is to use. For raids, the only use case I could find was in the monkey room in TOA. For Nilos and Maiden, it's terrible. And for Cox, well, it's just not really useful anywhere. You could use it at the Deathly Rangers and Mages if you had a Death Wish. Scavving maybe, but who brings an item in for scavving unless you're trying to ult in masses? Maybe ulting at Shamans, as you can clump them together and hit them for close range. But that's really just such a niche situation. Which then brings me to my final points about the bow. Ultimately, I don't think it's useful anywhere for bossing and raiding in the current boss and raiding environment. Its main use case is as an alternative to barraging for Slayer, which is then also less click intensive. If you want the range XP, you can just use the Venator bow, but if you want the magic XP, you can burst or barrage. With the Venator bow you can still get good XP rates whilst AFKing a lot. Where it really shines is when the density of mobs within a given room is high. So what I think it's really good for is just AFKing Bloodfelds and Dust Devils in the Catacombs to farm Ancient Shards and Totem Pieces, and then with those Totem Pieces you can then kill Skotizo for an extra 150 to 200k gold an hour, whilst also giving you a good opportunity to get Skotos as a pet. So should you get a Venator bow? If you want range XP that's AFK, and if you want Slayer XP that's AFK, then I'd definitely say yes. But would I go out of my way to get one if I don't have some essential PVMing items already? I'd say no. Overall though, I do really like the bow. I think it's a really good addition to the game and gives you more choices in how you want to play and opens up design space for future content and bosses. I've seen the bow get a lot of flack just due to the small number of use cases it currently has, but what I'd say to that is just be patient. I remember when the Hecarim of Tumakin was being discussed months back, and how many, including myself, didn't think it was worthy of that spot as the mage version of a T-bow and scythe. This is not to say that I don't like the Shadow, but now that I've seen the Tombs of Amascut for what it is and what's involved in the fights and so on, I think it really would have been an interesting addition to the game and switched up how people form teams and play together. Just look at the old effects on the Lunar Spellbook and how useful that would have been at Wardens and in the Monkey Room. Ancient Magics for level 2 Caffrey. In some cases, I think we need to give the old school team the benefit of the doubt when items are suggested and ultimately get pulled, as there is definitely a use case in the works behind the scenes, if not in the immediate future, but down the line. Let me know what you think. Have you got one? Have you thought of anywhere else that this could be used? Let me know in the comments below and I will see you in the next one. And unfortunately I didn't have a Slayer task so I couldn't actually test this, but you could also use this in the Smoke Dungeon to kill the Smoke Devils as well, as opposed to barraging if you wanted the range XP there as well. Just thought I'd add this in.